In the last video, we discussed how we're going to kind of wrangle these different instances of Web3 inside of our application. We're now going to flip on over to our code editor and write some code that is going to set up our own local instance of Web3 and rip out the provider from the injected copy that is coming from MetaMask. And this is what is going to allow our instance of Web3 to automatically connect to the Rinkeby test network and make use of all of the accounts that have been assigned to the MetaMask extension. So this is really going to make our lives a lot easier in the long run. It's just kind of understanding what's going on. That's the hard part. Okay, so back inside my code editor, I'm going to create a new file inside of my src directory. This file is going to house all of our configuration code around the Web3 library. So I'm going to make a new file. I'm going to call it simply web3.js, like so. Then inside of here, we're going to import the Web3 library at the top of the file. So this is going to look very similar to a lot of the test code or the test setup that we wrote just a little bit ago when we were working on the previous projects. So we'll say import Web3 from Web3. And remember, this is the constructor function, so we have a capital W right here. Then underneath this, we're going to create a new instance of Web3. And at the same time, we're going to rip that provider out from the injected copy of Web3 that has been provided by MetaMask. So we'll say const lowercase Web3 is new capital Web3. And then to rip out that provider, we're going to write window.web3.current provider, like so. Window right here is a reference to the window global variable. As we saw just a moment ago, MetaMask injects Web3 onto the Web3 global variable. So this right here is the copy of MetaMask that is coming, or excuse me, the copy of Web3 that is coming from the MetaMask library. And then the current provider property is, as you might guess, the provider that is installed or given to that copy of Web3. So this provider right here has been pre-configured to connect to the Rinkeby test network, and it has access to all of our account addresses, keys, public keys, everything we could possibly want. So we're taking that provider, we're giving it to our local copy of Web3, and that gives us a copy or an instance of Web3 that has been pre-configured and completely set up with no additional work required from you or me. Now, the very last thing we're going to do inside this file is export that thing. So we'll say export default Web3. So now any other file inside of our application can require or import this web3.js file, and it will get this pre-built, already configured, 100% setup version of Web3 that is the most recent version, version 1, or at least, most recent version as of the time I'm making this video. Cool, so that looks good. Now maybe the last thing that we should do is to import this thing into our app.js file, and then maybe console log out the version of this Web3 thing right here, just to make sure that it's working the way we expect. So I'm going to flip on over to my app.js file. I'm going to import Web3 from, and in this case, it's going to be from that Web3 file. So we're not working with the Web3 library or the package anymore. We're now working with the file Web3. So I'm going to say ./Web3, like so. Then how about inside the render method? I think that's a reasonable place. We'll say console.log web3. I think it's the lowercase version is the version. So let's now flip back over to our browser and see if we can get this console log to show up. All right, so back over inside my browser, you'll see that the page automatically refreshes. I'm going to open up my console, and there we go. So there's our version 1.0 beta.26. And if we want to, we could print out, say, a list of all of the accounts that are tied to this instance of Web3. So I could say web3.eth.get accounts. Remember, this returns a promise right here. Normally, we make use of the async await syntax, but we can't use async await with the render method of a React component. So instead, I'll chain on my promise. I'll say .then, and we'll just pass in console log, the function. Notice that I do not have a set of parentheses here. I'm going to just pass everything directly into console log. And that means that anything that getAccounts retrieves will be automatically logged to the console. So if I now go back over, the refresh already kicked in, and I'll see a console log of my account address. So clearly we have correctly set up our instance of Web3, and we have clearly ripped away or kind of hijacked the provider that was injected onto the page by MetaMask. And just to make sure, I will open up MetaMask and double check my address. Yep, so you can see CF019, CF019. All right, so like I said, this was, believe it or not, probably a lot of the value that you get from this course is me just telling you these things, because honestly, there is no other resource out there that says, hey, here's how we get our own version of Web3 working whenever we are using MetaMask. A lot of other resources out there say, oh yeah, you just got to use whatever version MetaMask is going to give you. But obviously, you and I want to use our version. We don't want to use the version that is coming from Web3, from MetaMask, because over time, MetaMask is going to change the versions used by Web3. And heck, it's even supposedly going to eventually deprecate the internal copy of Web3. All right, so let's pause here. We'll continue in the next video, and we're going to start making use of this instance of Web3 to retrieve some information from our contract. So quick break, and I'll see you in a minute.